Hi, my name is Dallin Garvey, and today we're going to be talking about Osama bin Laden, who he was, what he did, and the U.S. response to his life. To start off, Mohammed bin Laden was Osama's father, and he was born on the southern coast of Yemen in poverty-stricken Hadramaut coast. He was poor and uneducated, unloading ships for a living. In the 1930s, he packed his bags and headed for Saudi Arabia in search of a better life, and by the 50s, he had started his own construction company building palaces for Saudi royalty. By the 1960s, he was an extremely wealthy man. He had 22 wives and 56 children, one of them named Osama bin Laden. Osama's mother was Syrian and therefore was considered less worthy than the other wives. In fact, she was sometimes known as the slave wife. Despite being considered of lesser value, she was still treated well. Muhammad was killed in a helicopter crash when Osama was 11, and so he was left fatherless and to be raised by the rest of his massive family. Because of the wealth amassed by Muhammad, Osama grew up very privileged. He attended an elite Western-style school and was taught English by Brian Fifield Shaler. Osama was recalled by Brian, among others, to have been very courteous, shy, intelligent, and polite. He showed no resemblance of the radical leader that he would later become. During the 70s, there was a great cultural change in the Middle East. Increasing contact with Western countries began to reshape the Muslim countries, causing some to find comfort in the old traditions of conservative Islam. Osama's family members relished in the westernization of their country, and they left to London, Harvard, or California, maybe even Miami. However, bin Laden chose to stay and attend King Abdul Aziz University, studying civil engineering. But it was Islamic studies that caught his attention the most. It was here that he first came in contact with the sermons of Abdullah Azzam, a passionate scholar who taught that only a complete return to traditional Islam could save the Muslim world from Western corruption. Soon after, in November of 1979, radical Islamic militants seized the Grand Mosque at Mecca. They held worshippers hostage and demanded Saudi Arabia cut ties with America and expel all foreign powers from its boundaries. A bloody firefight erupted, and the Islamic militants were finally killed after inflicting heavy casualties. These fighters inspired bin Laden, adding fuel to his radicalization. One of the friends of Osama bin Laden said that Osama had told him that he was inspired by them. He told them these men were true Muslims and had followed a true path. Only months later, the opportunity arose for Osama to finally put his beliefs into practice, as the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. Bin Laden dropped everything and immediately aligned himself with the Mujahideen fighters, fighting to repel the Soviet invasion. It was during his time in the war that Osama became the battle-hardened leader that we all know him as. He fought ferociously against his Soviet enemies, often with complete disregard for his own safety. However, he also visited the wounded, brought gifts, sent money to the families of wounded fighters, and contributed millions of dollars to the war efforts. With his charisma, fearlessness, and generosity, his fame started to spread throughout the region. At the end of the war, bin Laden's fanaticism was set in stone. He despised the West, especially America. After being exiled from Saudi Arabia, he left to Sudan, where he continued gaining support. He made more investments, and money came along with it, recruited more fighters, and began his terror attacks on U.S. embassies and ships. He met with leaders of other terrorist organizations such as the Taliban, made truces with them, and finally made Afghanistan his new home. Bin Laden took advantage of the Mujahideen fighter militias left over from the Soviet-Afghan War, creating training camps, supplied funds, and in turn produced one of the most powerful radical groups the world has ever seen, Al-Qaeda. It was during this time that Osama masterminded his most ambitious attack on the U.S., the attacks on the World Trade Center. Early in September 11th of 2001, America stood in shock and terror as millions watched the Twin Towers collapse. Days later, while visiting Ground Zero, President Bush stood on the rubble of the towers and began his speech through a bullhorn, encouraging the men and women who responded to the chaos. However, as he started, a man in the back yelled out, "We can't hear you," to which President Bush gave one of his most powerful and iconic responses. He replied, "Well, I can hear you. I can hear you, the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon." Osama bin Laden had propelled himself to the top of America's most wanted list, and the U.S. was out for blood. After nearly a decade of following the leads, an opportunity to get Osama finally arose. Bin Laden had went into hiding, but the U.S. had finally caught up to him. The U.S. military sent members of its elite SEAL Team 6 unit to raid the compound bin Laden was believed to be hiding. Within 9 minutes of infiltration, Osama bin Laden was killed by multiple bullet wounds. Over the radio, the White House heard the comforting call from the team leader, "For God and country, Geronimo, Geronimo, Geronimo," meaning that it was in fact bin Laden that had been killed. Later that night, President Obama made a national address announcing the success of the raid that Osama bin Laden was dead. Minutes following the announcement, thousands of people flooded the streets of New York, congregating outside the White House, at Times Square, and at Ground Zero, celebrating the announcement. Fans at Citizens Bank Park attending the Phillies-Mets game heard the announcements and broke out in chants cheering USA, USA. Joy and resolution flooded the country and the world. Though it took nearly a decade, the U.S. had finally found its justice. Senator John McCain commented, "The world is a better and more just place now that Osama bin Laden is no longer in it. I hope the families of the victims of the September 11th attacks will sleep easier tonight and every night hence, knowing that justice had been done."